Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Charmaine Barrett, and I am from the lovely climatic Jamaica in the Caribbean. And, and I am one of the vice presidents for ICAE, or ICAI, as it's commonly referred to. And I'm the vice president for the Caribbean, and I'll be your moderator in place of Robbie, but he'll be my right-hand support this afternoon, because Robbie, as you know, fell ill and is not able to join us. So I'd like to welcome you all then to this session, and I anticipate it's going to be an exciting session, a session in which we are interacting with each other. And so I'd like to jump right into sharing with you the aims of the workshop. So we have identified 4 aims. The first is for us to identify the current global flashpoints that underscore the need for active citizenship education. And we know that you can read, but just for emphasis, that we are talking about active citizenship education that does not only recognize complexity and interrelationships, but the need to urgently respond to multiple crises. And I'm certain you would agree with me that there are many. These include, not to be outdone, the pandemic, ongoing conflict, natural disasters, climate crisis, migration of refugees, and so much more. Secondly, we acknowledge the active citizenship as a global concept, and because it is a global concept, then we have varying definitions, and so it is our hope that we would identify the diversity of what it means to be an active global citizen, as well as the rich educational approaches that accompany these concepts across the world. And thirdly, we are hoping to highlight the unique contribution of social movements and civil society actors working in the struggle against all forms of inequalities across the social, economic, and cultural, political, and environmental arenas. And finally, to identify the contributions of transformative adult learning and education to active global citizenship education for sustainable development, specifically the role of global policy frameworks, such as the Sustainable Development Goal 4.7 and the new social contract for education in building resilience. So that's our home today. And I think it's an ambitious set of objectives, but nothing we can't do without in this kind of collaborative form. So at this point, I want to ask Robbie to take over and give us an overview of the concept of active global citizenship. Robbie, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to acknowledge that I cannot see how many people are in the room, so it would be good, Charmaine, if you can say if we have a few in the room. We have a few online, but I'm also receiving feedback from our participants who are joining us via the live stream that there is some difficulty in hearing what we're saying. So I don't know. I'm just getting a message from our participants who are joining us on live stream. But I'd like to welcome everybody who are at different parts of the world. I am now speaking to you from Marrakesh, as I said, and I think it was shared yesterday that I am speaking to you from the hotel. Unfortunately, similar to one of the Moroccan ministers who spoke this afternoon, that I have tested positive. And so I think it's something we need to be careful in terms of, again, a global reality of the pandemic. One of the things that puts us really in an important space now is the Grail report. This was launched yesterday, and the Grail report recognizes in the very start that the pandemic has exposed us to the inequalities of our world.
Sorry, Robbie, can we move to the next slide? Can you allow me? Thank you.
It did not just, sorry, the first, Charmaine, can you go back? But it also exposed us to some of the issues that we're facing. Thank you, Charmaine. Okay? And when we started looking at global citizenship, it was so hard to find a definition. Even UNESCO, it was hard to find a definition, but I think this group managed to say that if the Global Citizenship Education Working Group said if at least one of the two of the following, the capacity to understand and evaluate global processes, problems, and challenges, and the effects at the individual and a global issues, a human rights and cultural sensitivity and openness perspective, and individual or collective action. So if you will look at it, there's an element of global citizenship. It's about an understanding, an element of a commitment to human rights and sensitivity and openness, but also action. This can be found, of course, in SDG 4.7. And I think what's important to mention here is the Global Monitoring Report in 2016 said more than any target, 4.7 touches on social, humanistic, and moral purposes of education. It explicitly links to education to other SDGs and captures the transformative aspirations of the Global Development Agenda. And I think yesterday, one of our vice presidents, Timothy Ireland, spoke about the relevance to the Futures of Education report, the new social contract, that recognizes that in terms of what adults have to play, is that it helps adults understand and critique changing paradigms and power relations to take steps towards shaping a just and sustainable world. So there's a conceptual element. There's a future orientation that sees also that adult education is education is entangled with life, okay, and it's a shared ethic of intergenerational solidarity. So I think just to frame that this is something that is not actually new. If you look at the Delors report, it also recognizes the four pillars that talks about learning to be, learning to know, learning to do, but also learning to live together. But I think more than that, we are now advancing to something that the Futures of Education report is challenging us. And at the heart of that, I think, is active global citizenship. Thanks, Charmaine.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so here we are at this point of our interaction. We are going to be, Robbie, are you going to take us through talk to us about the Mentimeter?
Okay, and so as Charmaine said, what we wanted to do this afternoon is not, again, this is all about active citizenship and active engagement. So those who are also on the live stream, not just the people who are on Zoom or up there, you can actually scan the QR code. We would like to find out from you, okay? There were 3 questions we'd like you to respond to in the first round. There are 2 rounds of the Mentimeter. The first round is, what are the 3 global issues that ALE must respond to? So what for you are the key global issues? The second question, can you identify 2 qualities of an active global citizen? Or maybe I can say what makes you an active global citizen, the fact that you're here with us today. And then finally, what is one effective global citizenship activity that you either do as an educator, or maybe an effective global citizenship activity that you yourself have been transformed to be an active citizen? So these first 3 questions I call the 3-2-1, okay? The context, the capacities, and an activity that we'd like to learn. And so while we're waiting for the responses to that, thanks, that's wonderful. The person online, it's now bigger, it's clearer, so I'd rather them see that than them see me. Okay.
All right.
So over to you, Charmaine.
Thank you, Robbie. So as you've heard, this in keeping with how the IKEA functions, it's very inclusive and engaging, so it promises to be an interactive time with online participation, but we also will have some interactive panel sessions, and I'd like to introduce you to all those who would speak with us this afternoon. And in keeping with the questions, we will look at our presentations will be along the lines of those questions. So the first set of presentations will come addressing the question, what makes an active global citizen? And to help us to answer this question, we have I should say up front that the speakers demonstrate the global representation of the membership of ICAE. So our first speaker will be Carol Hunju. I hope I got it right, Hunju, out of Pomoja, West Africa. And then we have Ronald Cameron. Thank God I can call that. It's all English. And he was representing IKEA, and he's out of Canada. So you will note that we speak like, but he's French, but I'm glad his name is quite English. And then the second set of the question looks at the effective AIL approaches, and then we will have Nelida, Cespedes. Let's hope I got that right. But I won't speak the Spanish, so she will tell you the name when she gets on. And she will be addressing the question about effective approaches, and I will also be sharing. Please note that I was down originally to just share here, but with Robbie being unable to be with us, I took up this other role. And finally, we will have presentations looking at the third question around policy and responding to what do we see that's possible, and how would we have informed the Marrakesh Framework for Action. We should have had Christy Rhodes with us, but I think she also fell ill, and so she might not be with us. And then we would have Elsie Wakil with us. Is Elsie in the room? Okay, good. So that's how we will go. So let's move right along. And by now you would be engaging with the Mentimeter, and you would be putting in your responses. We'll see those right now. We would love to see the responses for the first questions. Will that be possible? And let's see what your responses have been to what do you see as the global issues that AIL must respond to. Will the tech team assist me? Let's give them a minute. Okay, nothing? Angela, is there anything? Can you tell me if I'll be getting the... there we go. But the responses only show me that we have... So in the room, did you participate? Yes. No?
Yes.
2 persons. We have yes. A few questions, few responses. How many responses did we have?
They might need to refresh because I can see 20 responses.
Okay, so refresh. But already we were seeing climate change. I'm not able to say what else we saw. Robbie, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing there's huge focus on climate change.
Okay, I'm seeing that. Go ahead.
You have poverty. Gender equality is also huge. And then you have violence, justice, literacy. And so I think inequality. So it's a combination of very specific problems, but also identifying, I think, inequalities and literacy as a problem. So those are the ones that I see. So I don't know what you're seeing now on your screen.
Yes, we are seeing...
there you are.
Yeah, we are seeing...
Sorry.
We are seeing all of them now. But I'm still asking you and to go ahead because I can only see climate change. I cannot read that from here. So you did me very well.
Okay. Yes, so for those looking at the screen, yes, so I think it's interesting, this combination now, I think, of climate change and climate crisis. So it's an issue around that. And I'm just trying to also see, I think justice and violence appears, injustice appears, peace appears, populism appears, inclusion, and if you see me looking, massacres, green transition, gender, peace and conflict. Okay.
So quite a complex picture.
Yes. So and I think part of that is when we talk about global citizenship is this recognition. The first is conceptual recognition of what's the problem. Okay, because I think often we don't identify, we immediately ask people to say, you need to be trained to become active global citizens, but what is the problem in the first place? And I think this is important to recognize, one, that there are problems, but I think what even the Grail report talks about is that these problems are interrelated and interconnected to each other. And I think that's part of this understanding, and a lot of people will talk about this notion of the fake news or alternative realities, but I think part of that is understanding what is the problem in the first place.
And so basically thanks, Robbie, what we're saying is we're taking the concept out of the academic realm and placing it where it belongs, allowing us to see that we are global citizens with an aim towards some very practical situations, some practical issues that need attention. And so it is interesting to see the big things that are coming out, the inequality, the need for justice and poverty. And so those are key things. So when we are thinking about global citizenship, it is how do we act together to deal with these kinds of challenges? And that's what's before us. And so we want to now move into our first round of panel discussions, and we want to look at what we have been saying is, thank you, and so can I get back to the slides now? So thank you so much. So here we are looking at the kinds of issues that we should address, or global citizens education seeks to address. But what exactly is a global citizen? And so we're going to ask our panelists to share with us their perspectives. First, we are going to have Carol from Pamoja. She will share with us. And so the floor is yours, Carol.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I will speak French in order to be inclusive. So please use your headset.
Well, while you get your words, maybe I should do this first. So hold a while. Maybe I should do it differently. I'm not even sure if they are ready for me. But this, as I said, this part is looking at our active citizenship. And when I flipped, I saw that my Mentimeter came up. So can we get the results here? Just before, let's see what is said there as how we have defined active citizenship. Wow.
Can you see that, Charmaine?
Yes, I can see. People see it? I have learned how to see it. My back is turned a little to the audience. But here we are. Its question says, qualities of an active global citizen. And so I'll stand for that so I don't turn my back to you. As an actress, I know that's wrong. So we have critical thinking. So what we're saying, if we are to be able to be of value to the problems we found earlier, then we have to demonstrate certain kinds of skills and competencies. And the first one we have here, because if you understand, the mentee is going to give us the big one, says there are several of us who feel that way. But then I like this one, understand interconnection, critical understanding, caring for the environment, democratic engagement. And here is this one, compromise, common benefits. That's interesting. And then those of you who are able to read that language, you may go so. But for me, I would stay at empowered, commitment, open-mindedness, and very interestingly, media literacy is there. And given the kinds of things we just discussed in the previous session, it would show that that is important. So here is what you have said. Let's hear what our panelists will share about in terms of what they see and what their experiences have been about being active global citizens. Carol, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Germaine. Merci pour l'opportunité.
Thank you very much for the opportunity given to me by ICAE, namely to share the experience of the Pamoja network in the area of active citizenship. Pamoja, West Africa, is an adult education network based in Benin. We're a network of 14 countries in Western Africa, and we mostly work on increasing quality of adult education, but also we do advocacy work to ensure that our member states. We have a slight technical problem. The moderator asking for help changing the slides. This is the interpreter explaining for those of you following us on Zoom.
Go back again. Okay, the next one, yeah.
Thank you.
Donc, je disais que
So as I was saying, we do advocacy work to ensure that our member countries focus more on youth and adult education. In order to do that, we need to share concrete proof, evidence, factual data. That is why we also promote good practices, and we use the reflect approach and other participative approaches to help youth and adults to think critically so that they can then adapt to life situations. And so we asked them to share. I was asked to share one experience of active citizenship taken from what we do. And this is a part where I would like to give you a bit of context. Now, we worked a lot with a program for pastoralists. Those are mobile herders. They go through Benin, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Chad with their herds. Now, Chad is not part of Western Africa, but this specific program also addresses the needs of these mobile livestock herders. Now, we noted a lot of bloodshed between farmers and livestock herders, mobile livestock herders. The cause of these bloody conflicts is mostly linked to the fact that these mobile cattle breeders do not have the proper level of education. So the program really aims to give these nomadic herders the ability to learn about their rights as part of lifelong learning in order to have peaceful relationships with the other stakeholders in the communities that they traverse. So through this program, we have helped these breeders get information about their rights, also learn about the rules in force in the country that they are going to be crossing through, because they cross borders, they are mobile. Often they do not know the law in this next country, and therefore this wreaks havoc. It leads to some damage that they may be held liable for. So we teach them about the law there so that they are no longer in an unlawful situation, because when they do get into that country, often they hide because they've had a bad experience before. They don't want to get caught by the authorities, and our program strives to establish a dialogue between the breeders and the local authorities. So when they cross a border, they can immediately go to the closest town, they register, they get a paper or a certificate that allows them to move around the country as they need to. Through this program, we realize that there was a huge discrepancy between official data and actual reality. In my country, Benin, our statistics show that the rate of schooling is 114%. So we realize that about 2 million children are actually not in school. They can't be included in the statistics because these are the children, these mobile breeders. So through our work, we were able to do some advocacy work to ensure that the children of breeders can go to school. It's called the School of the Second Chance. And this year, many of them were able to get their primary school leaving certificate, and that's a great success for us, we feel. And I'd like to also give you the example of elections in Gambia. Now, in our context, elections can be a source of conflict. When election time comes up, tensions run high, and through our adult education program, we've been able to have peaceful elections. For example, a village in Gambia, when the lists were published, lists of candidates, lists of voters were published, there were more voters, so-called registered on the list, than there were inhabitants in the village. But the village had already mapped the number of residents. They knew exactly how many official residents were in that village. And so the villagers went to see the authorities and said, no, in our village, our number is X and not Y as marked on your list of voters. As a result, the list was modified and officially registered voters were able to vote peacefully and transparently. And that's one of the strengths of the work that we do to help adults really be resilient in their own local context, to be able to adapt and find practical, pragmatic solutions to issues they may run into. So just to end, I would like to say that in Benin, in our literacy centers, and I'm still talking about mobile breeders, these are people who have very low self-esteem. They see themselves as subhuman. They don't go and vote. They're not allowed to vote in many cases. But through this program now, these herders now know that they can take an active part in managing their country, and they can go and vote. And in the most recent elections in Benin, it was with great joy that we saw some of these mobile breeders go and get their voters package and go and vote. And so being an active citizen is about being able to learn, being able to adapt and act based on the conditions that you're confronted with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. So what we have learned and what we could add to that list that we just looked at is the reflect approach, which is very, very important to me. Again, we heard her talk about critical thinking and the need, this is a big one for me coming from what you shared, Carol, is the need to understand rights to be able to act. And the fact that action is taking place and action is important, and is action at the community level. And then it seems that we can never get rid of capacity building. And in order to help persons to be active citizens, then from the experience Carol shared, we saw that capacity building was an important part of that. All right, so now, thank you, Carol, and now over to you, Ron.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. I'd also like to thank you for this opportunity to present to you, to talk about an initiative that really is a bridge between global citizenship education and international solidarity. The rapporteur on the Future of Education report yesterday mentioned international solidarity as an important dimension. Now, I want to tell you about international solidarity more upstream that leads to citizenship education instead of being the result of. 16th November 2021, there was an international francophone conference meeting between 120 people who all wanted to develop citizenship education based on their practice of international solidarity. On the initiative of Citizenship, which is a French network that also has contacts with Belgium, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, and the Quebec Association for International Cooperation. I'm from Quebec in Canada. I know my name is Cameron. Sounds English to you.
My mother tongue is French.
But, says the speaker in English, my mother tongue is French. So anyway, I was talking about this network of networks, a federation that does awareness raising about international solidarity. So the goal of the conference was to share good practices and also the decolonialist dimension. So because we share the same language, we were able to have a north-south conversation. The perspective or the outlook is to be able to set up a francophone international network for global citizenship education and international solidarity. Global international citizenship has a direct links with international solidarity, and the concept of international solidarity is seen as a social and political struggle, not just as a gesture of charity. It modifies power relationships in countries by bringing citizens' movements from the north and encouraging them to join forces in solidarity with struggles in the global south. But in order to be understood in the global north, education organizations need to educate the population, citizens, in order to spur politicians to act against colonial movements abroad, but also the colonial dimension within their own countries. In terms of transforming the power play, the definition of citizenship education takes its roots in one of the components of popular education. So it is a political approach that aims at empowering everyone and changing the power balance in favor of the oppressed. And the educational dimension has to do with producing knowledge and know-how. It also assumes a political dimension for the benefit of activists, movement activists, and via public political awareness raising. And I think that you were absolutely right to associate citizenship education to climate change awareness. But today, we need to recognize that with the pandemic, there are many imperialist struggles. There's the radical right, migration, sudden impoverishment of populations, and a growing revenue gap. And international solidarity now has even greater scope of application. That is why we more than ever need to transmit knowledge in order to raise awareness. There are crises that spur awareness, and we need to support social mobilization. So how can we implement global citizenship education within our dialogue that we're trying to set up? There's still a lot to do, but what's clear, as Katarina Povoj says in a Nikkei publication, global citizenship education currently is being increasingly recognized. We know it through the Futures of Education, but also in the UN with the Sustainable Development Goal 4, and also within the Council of Europe that calls it a double education. And so based on that recognition, this North-South Francophone network can take this approach further and reach for social transformation. And amongst what we need to do, there's the collective elaboration of analysis and strategy with the real stakeholders, promoting international solidarity that is co-constructed with the first liners. Also, the development of emancipating pedagogy that is in solidarity, anti-systemic, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, and decolonial in its approach. We need to strengthen our capacities in order to effect global citizenship education. We also need to raise awareness amongst our political decision makers and invite them to provide greater support to global citizenship education initiatives that are critical and transformative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. And yes, I hear very clearly citizens' action, again, action coming up. Very strongly, you spoke about resistance, and that is a part of what we do. It's advocacy, it's capacity building, it's also resistance. And again, we hear the concept of awareness raising and acting as a collective. So thank you so much for your contribution. Okay, so now we turn our attention to the third question. So if we could see the results of the third question, that would be very useful. Yes, and while we are seeing the results of the third question, which is up, I'm going to thank my two panelists here now, and I'm going to invite, I can invite you from now, but the next panelist will be online. So can I invite Christy Rhodes to come ahead, and who is the next one? Oh, Elsie. So it's Christy who won't be here. So it will be Elsie.
It's Charmaine. Sorry,
yes?
It's Nelida first.
I know. Thank you. I'm just inviting her to come and sit with me, Elsie. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yes, come. All right, good. So let's look at question 3 and see what we gleaned from that question. So the question says, we are looking at effective global citizenship education activity, and the big thing we said is that it includes partnership. And I think it bears in line with what we were hearing before about acting with a collective. It's speaking about popular education, about exposure to other cultures, adult learning centers, discussion forum, and you will see that I grabbed to that one, then you will see shortly. It talks about community dialogues, political participation, and so what we are hearing is acting together. It's talking about linking the critical reflection up the top with some of the things that we are supposed to do here. So we have invited 2 speakers to take us forward and to reflect on this matter. The first is, I already introduced her, so Nelida is joining us online, and I'm going to ask her to go ahead, and then after her, I will make my presentation. Nelida, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you know, I have a big problem, not so big, because I'm supposed to speak in Spanish. And we know that UNESCO also is a language also from the CONFINTEA. But okay, I'm going to try my best. And I am very, I am Nelida from CEAL. CEAL is a movement of popular educators with a compromise to push justice, democracy, and a commitment to fight against all kinds of inequalities, because we also think that we have to be in a very human society. CEAL affirms in the popular education approach, that is that I am very in touch, with the responses from the mentee. And that approach has 3 perspectives. an ethical perspective, and political and a pedagogical perspective, because bases in Latin American and popular education, such Paulo Freire. Why do we say ethics? Because no one is left behind, and also we were locally identifying excluded groups, working with young and adult people, because this is one of the violented groups, also in all our countries. Why is a political perspective? Because we contribute to the training of people for the personal and social transformation, through actions, to research. Together also, we collect experiences, systematize that experience, because we want that experience, that good experience, will be part of the national and local policies. Also, in the pedagogical perspective, we think that it's very, very important to sharing knowledge. It's also with dialect. It's based also in a critical knowledge and analytical knowledge, because, we have to transform these societies where we live in a context also, with cooperation, solidarity, with relevance to age, gender, and culture. That is a reason that we think that popular education is linked with citizenship, but it's very important to work locally, to have a very strong identified in the local spaces, to also have a link with global citizens in favor of the common good. And now, in this very changing world with a big crisis, we are making for us also and for everybody some questions, In the face of the crisis of the civilizations, we require, education for young and adult people, very linked with life. Also, to have a very holistic perspective with peace and human rights, and also to start from the reality, promoting an integral formation with harmony with our Mother Earth and the good common. This also, we are also, very upset. And this education, this young and adult education, has to be faced with an education that don't homogenize knowledge. That is the reason that we talk about epistemic justice. This education has to respond to the plurality of knowledge from programs, methodologies, with contact with the communities, linking to the production, and also with various cultural forms. So that assumes social relevance and culture. Also, we have to rethink the training programs of the trainers for all educators in all the spaces, including the academic ones, basic and popular education, critical thinking, assuming ethical, political, pedagogical perspectives with biocentric and also gender approach, promoting learning from the decolonization of knowledge. That is very important also for us. Education has to develop also from the local spaces to recognize, to collect, to disseminate local experiences, and from there, a dialogue with the global citizenships. For us also, it's very important, and we call to our governments and also, the cooperation, because the budgets from young and adult education is really a poor financial. What citizenships to promote if there is no fair investment? The same question again, we only said not only to the government, also for the international cooperation. Our education, our young and adult education is invisibilized in our countries. We have, to promote the educations and requiring also various actors. So it is necessary to articulate social, political process and social movement. We are also, we said, in our documents from the CONFINTEA, it has to be very clear, the popular education, not as a methodology, not as a technical, is a focus important for a political training in with young and people and all people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nelida. And of course, you were able to see that some of the things that we saw on the Mentimeter, we would have heard some of it, localized curriculum, being inclusive, but central to that is popular education. And I have been falling in love with this term since yesterday, epistemological justice. And so what that says to me is the need to link that with localized curriculum, and you will see that that is where we are. So now it's my time to put on another hat and as a panelist and to share my own perspective. So can I have the slides? Ability to, okay, good. So the first slide, what I tried to do there was just to share with you, being the educator that I am, we need to start. If we're going to look at approaches, then we need to know what it is we are trying to accomplish. So the goal for me is about, when I'm speaking about global citizenship education, is about individual action, as we saw in the case of Pomajo, the case in Africa, that it really was about two examples of local action, and that individuals must get to that place. And it's a willingness to identify, understand, and evaluate the challenges. And so that's where we are heading. We are trying to develop the capacity to engender social justice among ourselves, to defend human rights, to develop cultural sensitivity and an openness, very big openness to different perspectives, because as we seek to address the challenges of the previous slide that we looked at earlier, I distracted myself because I said, who will time me? But anyway, so, and that the aim we are going for is transformative behavior. So that's where we are going, transformative behavior to stimulate individual action and a willingness to be open to different perspectives in order to help us to get where we are. So for me, the approach must always, and this is my approach to community development, it must always begin at the individual level. And at the individual level, I refer to that as reflexivity, that we must engage in a process of reflexivity. That, for some of you would know, that's an academic term that has very real actionable items to it. So it really is talking about action arising out of our own reflection on our behaviors. And so I see it as a tool for both personal growth and development, and as a tool for engagement. I find synergy between reflexivity and Jack Miserer's levels of reflection. And I absolutely love that as a tool for transformation, because transformation must begin with the individual. So reflexivity speaks and draws on what we spoke about critical thinking, being able to think critically about one's own action. And it gives, it brings to life the notion of praxis, where when we act, we must stop and reflect on our actions. And based on that reflection, make some adjustments and then act again. So it is really looking at a process that makes explicit the examination of our assumptions, our personal beliefs, our dispositions, and how all of those impact our attitudes towards situations and towards others. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that we act out of our thoughts. We act based on what we see. I respond, when I do this with my students, I say I get angry at you because I have some perspectives of how the teacher-student relationship should be. So it is important for us to constantly be reflecting on our perspectives. If we do not do this, then all we are doing is talking and it's rhetoric. Because when we are pushing back, we have to know that we are willing to examine ourselves. But as you see from the diagram, it has, the arrowheads are going both ways. Because that reflexivity, which I call internal contemplations, is going to impact our interpersonal engagement. And for me, the educative process that leads to this, that is involved here, is the dialogic approaches. So you notice that I had identified that earlier when we were going through the Menti results. So dialogue now, as a tool for development and for education around global citizenship, puts human interaction at the center of all of that. I heard it throughout the day, talking about collaboration. Even when we were looking at media and technology, it was about collaboration. So dialogic processes acknowledges the power of conversation, and it speaks to exploratory skills, which calls for, I'm getting my time signal? Okay, which calls for a collaborative sort of dialogue through which people exchange and challenge each other's ideas and critically, but I would say constructively, analyze those ideas. So it encourages us to engage in what I describe as wider and deeper thinking, being willing to question ideas and to explore new points of view. It is only that way that we can find synergy or a coming together around issues like climate change, about issues like poverty. It's when opposing sides come together, exchange their thoughts, and respect each other. So it's the way of reaching understanding, of finding new meaning and new solutions. And for me, building consensus among people. That's what this dialogic approach is about. I feel that dialogic approaches give agency to individuals. And so it's not just those who are in power, but like Nalida spoke about, the local community, and as Carol shared with us, the local community being empowered to act. And I like that. So the dialogic approach I see as a tool for collective thinking, which should lead to collective actions. Maybe pushing back, as Ron pointed out, it could be resistance, but it could be just knowing your rights and acting together. So in summary, my conclusion as to an approach that is useful builds on internal contemplations that builds our capacity to engage with each other. Thank you. All right, so now I say thank you, Charmaine. Thank you, Nelida, for your contribution. And thank you, audience, for your contribution so far. That's where we are at this point. So we are going to move on with the agenda. Give me a minute. So here I'm reminding you, we have just answered. Basically, we are going through 3 rounds of questions. First, we were looking, just for your idea, about what are the kinds of global issues that we have to deal with when we are talking about global citizens. Then we looked at what are the qualities of an active global citizen. And then we did some discussion around possible, and I'm certain you would have some other contributions around other ways in which you have been engaging your communities in education, in ways of education. So I am certain you would have some contributions to that. And so I'm not sure if we have, Robbie, are you seeing any kinds of questions or so in the chat? But I want to open the floor for a short while, maybe 5 minutes, to get some feedback on anything that you feel, any additional approach that you feel would be useful as an educative approach to building citizenship. Any feedback? Yes,
just
Robbie?
time check. I think you should time check because we're supposed to finish the session now.
Okay. All right, so that means we'll have to skip.
So can you proceed?
Right, you have to check for me. It's a little challenging to do everything. So let's go. So then we'll jump that over and ask you to put in the chat, if those of you who can. And so we'll go right on to the next question. And and this is our last presentation anyway. So tell me when you see yours.
Yes, here.
Okay. Right, so I'm going to invite Elsie to make her presentation around the question of the urgency and how we should respond.
Okay, so this is the price and the cost of the last speaker. So I have only a few minutes to talk about that. But first, let's introduce me. I'm the General Secretary for the Arab House for Adult Education and Development. What's the vision of AHED and what we are doing? So it's an enlightened citizenship in a civil society that acts on the principles and values of human rights and democratic citizenship and accept plurality and diversity. AHED is a catalyst for educational change for both public and private in the Arab world by providing a unified base of adult education in the Arab world, by striving the creation of education and change through shared dialogue, interaction, and exchange among the different partners and stakeholders. We have 4 main partners and 1 supporting partners with DVV, and the 4 other networks is Arab Network for Popular Education, AKIA, Arab Campaign for Education for All, ANLE, which is the Arab Network for Literacy and Adult Education, and the last one is the Arab Network for Civic Education. So we are striving to amend local laws to harmonize the development of education as a tool for change, working to improve quality of education and motivate governments to ask for the academy's help in developing education. We had last year, when we were asking to give a story, a real story that in our region we are working on the citizenship and global citizenship, I thought about AHED, because AHED really is doing a capacity building on many levels with the animators, trainers, intellectuals. We worked last year and we focused on the citizenship education, adult education, we had a thematic seminar, which was a preparation for a global regional Arab Academy. We tackled many issues on the global level, on the regional level, and at the local level concerning the citizenship and adult education. First of all, we remark that the concept of citizenship in Arabic is different from the English one. So we have many meanings in Arabic of the concept of the citizenship. That's why we define together what is citizenship in our understanding as Arab people in the region. Then we work on many axes we tackled, and we published them in a special edition for the Arab Academic. It was for the civil citizenship and adult education, which is sorry. We had a global citizenship, a critical perspective. Then we had a session about multiple Occidental pressures to teach citizenship. And this is what we are feeling in the region, that the citizenship is coming from abroad to be taught in our region. Then we had discoveries on the path to citizenship. Then we listen from the civil society organizations, historical responsibility and policies about the citizenship. Then we had Paulo Freire, for sure, because he's the one that he leads us to a new citizenship that we need really to live nowadays. I invite you to visit our website, ahed.org. You can find this important document, which all the texts and speeches is published. I need to also talk about a special, an important policy paper that AHED and ASPE works on. It was the policy paper on citizenship and adult education, which also we mentioned here, two case studies from our networks working on popular education, which is the Arab Network Popular Education and the Arab Network for Civic Education. Because here, going from the capacity building through dialogue, accepting each other, and going to the reconciliation. And this is, for our understanding, this is the citizenship. And we have many other stories about how there is many projects in our regions. I can say two names of the projects. I will say it in Arabic because it's in Arabic in Egypt. مشروع أندية الكبار. And there is another one, مشروع نتعلم لنحيا سوية من أجل الكون. These two projects are only citizenship education for learners, animators, animators and trainers, which they are through learning through dialogue. They are practicing their citizenship, and they are also trying to change their society, their country, their their regime, etc., etc. So this is the transformation from the capacity building going to the transformation to achieve the change in our world. So thank you. This is time finish. Thank you. On time. Shukran.
Thank you so much, Elsie. And as with these situations, just when you are trying to get everybody to be able to share, your time is out. So at this point, I just want to thank you for joining with us. Thank you for sharing your views via the Menti. Good thing we had that for you to engage. And I'd like to close by saying, let's come together, support each other, and proclaim to the world that we are ALE. Thank you. Merci.